many times, that light will be on. It's in the evening. I go out, I've got the trash bag, I walk to the end of the garage where the recycling bin and that kind of stuff is, to set the trash bag out there, to wait for the next trash day. And the timing is perfect for that light to go off when I'm at the end of the garage. Now, for some of you crazy, neurotic people in here, that would be no big deal. You have clean garages. When that light goes off and it's dark and I'm at the end of the garage, can't see a thing. There is literally a death trap-filled obstacle course between me and getting back to the door to get into the house. I mean, there's boxes, it's all the daily Amazon boxes, right, waiting for recycling day. We've got my Jeep is in the garage parked. We've got the cleaning supplies, like house cleaning stuff over here, which means brooms, and oftentimes brooms that, for whatever reason, because we have a lot of people in our house moving around, broomsticks that have fallen over halfway, and it's far from a straight path. And so I'm at this end of the garage, and I've got to figure out, with all of these obstacles in front of me, how to get up there to the door to get back into the house. And you don't take your phone with you to go out to take that trash bag, right? At least I don't. So I've got no flashlight either. What do? The same thing any of you would do, right? You gotta do the shuffle, right? Can't pick your feet up and walk because very likely you're gonna trip over and fall over something. So it's shuffle and hands out to see is obviously the wrong word, to feel what's there in the pitch black. No way to navigate apart from literally the only way to be able to do that without hurting myself is what I can feel, or based on how many times I've done it before, maybe recalling my past experience. Not the same every time, so that's not a surefire route, but something I can remember, okay, usually there's stuff over here, kind of working my way through it. It's really easy, I think, to go through our daily lives feeling that way, like we're going through circumstances, and everything that we're going through can feel like we're navigating them in complete spiritual darkness. Let me tell you what I mean by that. We talk about God working a lot, especially around the church, the kind of conversations, dare I call it the Christianese conversations of God's always at work, God's working. But the reality is when you're driving to work in the morning, if you work downtown, or you're working your way through the kids' drop-off line at the local elementary school, there's not any real big signs that scream, God is working. Matter of fact, sometimes it feels quite the opposite, doesn't it? You're driving to work amidst all that traffic, and you're encountering some of the angriest people that you will encounter that entire day. The kid drop-off line isn't any. Angry, frustrated, impatient people. The truth is, as we navigate life, there are very rarely moments when God is working is like plastered somewhere, obviously in front of you. Most of the circumstances that we navigate can feel like we are navigating them amidst complete darkness. You get home, so many of the influence that we have. You finish a day of work, you get home, you have young kids, maybe you get the kids settled. You sit down for the first time to take a deep breath, and if you open social media, what are you surrounded by? You're not surrounded by all of these stories of the way that God's present, moving, and working around you. You're actually seeing right the opposite. culture and the world, you're usually seeing nothing that is blatantly a display of the presence and work of God. For those who don't have any relationship with Jesus, even those who are early in that journey of a relationship with Jesus, that darkness characterized by that void of being able to perceptively, to be able to see any obvious presence of the work of God, is maybe all you know, all you've ever seen in life. And for even those of us who maybe we've been walking with Jesus for a long time, we have a relationship with him. Maybe we would even characterize it as a good, healthy relationship with Jesus. There are even many seasons in our own life when we're going through things and it feels like we're out there in that garage and all the lights are off. There's no beacon, lighthouse blasting this beam of light saying, God's here and God's working. It seems like we can't even imagine a way that he could possibly be working amidst the circumstances that we're facing. The book of Esther is where we're beginning this morning, and we'll travel through much of the fall. The book of Esther is a story that demonstrates how God works amidst ungodly cultures, amidst an ungodly world that's filled with spiritual darkness. It's a story that describes how God is working in the times when you and I can't see or imagine how he might be working. It's also a story that reminds us how important our identity is, both as individuals, the you singular, identity as followers of Jesus, and also the identity that we have, you plural, those of you who are the church, those of you who have placed your faith in Jesus, us here as Crossings Community Church. It's a story that reminds us of our identity in Christ, which becomes then how we navigate those seasons when all we can see with our naked eye is the darkness that surrounds. I want to give you a little bit of background as much as I can. There's hard to do much with the book of Esther in terms of background, but if you want to just make your way there in your Bible, when I get to reading it, we will have it on the screen. If you don't have a Bible with you this morning, we do have some copies on the floor if you'd like. But the style, the literary genre of this Old Testament book of Esther, the genre fits the theme in a very beautiful way. Let me tell you what I mean by that. The ungodliness that's illustrated in the culture that we're going to read about here is also represented by the fact that God is never mentioned in the book. Historically, this was a problem at different times throughout history as people questioned whether or not Esther should be here in the Bible. But I find it so just amazingly sovereign, so beautiful that God took and this theme of this amazing narrative and this story, that we have it, and the theme of it, how God works amidst the circumstances when we can't see or imagine how he's working. That is taught to us and delivered amidst a genre where he isn't named. It's all fitting. So this absence of an explicit mention of God in Esther is One way that the genre supports the main idea here, that God is working amidst all of these times. And the other aspects of that are just understanding a little bit about the historical background. It's the reality of the Persian Empire that we're going to read about here, how massive it was at this point in history, and how prideful and egotistical it was, of course, marked by the rulers and the leaders. At this point, it spanned from India to North Africa, into Turkey, 127 provinces. So if you're anything like me and you're not good with geography, we'll just say it this way: it was huge, okay? Huge, huge powerhouse. This empire grew. Their strategy or target was, we want two things. We want to swallow up land and we want to swallow up water. That was the strategy that they functioned with. So the more water that we can take, natural existing water, and the more land we can take, the more wealthy we will be. They were right. That's what happened. They grew, and they grew by assimilating those. And so this brings us into chapter 1, verse 1. I'm going to read verse 1 through 4 here of Esther. It says this, verse 1. Now, in the days of Ahasuerus, who reigned from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces, in those days when King Ahasuerus sat on his royal throne in Susa, the citadel, in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a feast for all his officials and servants. The army of Persia and Media and the nobles and governors of the provinces were before him, while he showed the riches of his royal glory and the splendor and pomp of his greatness for many days, that is 180 days. So you can begin to picture this. The king throws a party. 180 days, that's approximately 6 months. He throws a party and he invites to this party all of the military and political leadership. They all come together and he is impressing them with this extreme extravagance of all, not only that he has, but also all that this empire has. So a feast or a party like this, where the military leaders or the political leaders were invited to come to the king's quarters and they celebrate, like, it wasn't extremely uncommon, okay? It wasn't a regular event like anything that happened at this regular specified interval at this size, but it had happened. What is unique about what happens here is what we read next. Verse 5. When these days were completed, so this is after the 180 days, the king gave for all the people present in Susa, the citadel, both great and small, a feast lasting for 7 days in the court of the garden of the king's palace. There were white cotton curtains and violet hangings fastened with cords of fine linen and purple to silver rods and marble pillar. We go on to see this description of how extravagant it is. And then in verse 7, drinks were served in golden vessels, vessels of different kinds. The royal wine was lavished according to the bounty of the king. And the drinking was according to this edict. There is no compulsion, for the king had given orders to all the staff of his palace to do as each man desired. Queen Vashti also gave a feast for the women in the palace that belonged to King Ahasuerus. So, at the conclusion of this 180-day huge party, this is where things get unique. He's going to extend it for 7 days, and he's going to invite everybody from the city. Rich, poor, status, no status. It didn't matter. They were all invited to this place. This location, what we just read, described the court of the garden of the king's palace. This, one historian described it as 110,000 square feet, 6 stories high. And as you saw in the description we just read, of extravagance, massive extravagance. And the people that he's now invited to come in and enjoy that space, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for them. They would have never had any other opportunity, would have never, will never probably have another opportunity to come in to this space with the king here. Maybe you're wondering why. Why would he do such a thing? Well, there are a couple different reasons. One, I think the obvious reason, ego and pride. Everybody, look what I have. Look what I've done. Look what I've accomplished as your king. Look at the extravagance. The other motivation is he was likely preparing with a political motivation for the coming invasion that he had his sights set on in Macedonia. So he's garnering political support. There's an element of even fundraising, I think, that's going on here with those political and military leaders that are gathering. They all gather in the space, rich and poor, once in a lifetime opportunity. And I can just imagine, don't get me wrong here, I have a very blessed life. I don't want anybody to misunderstand. The Lord is blessed immensely, okay? But I remember when our kids were small, having conversations with them as we were about to go to someone's house, saying, okay, kids were little. It's okay, the right thing to do here is to tell them that they have a very pretty home. It's not okay to tell them how expensive everything looks. It's not okay to say, you have a very expensive house or anything like, just tell them they have a beautiful home. So I can imagine as what's going on here as these citizens of Susa, for the first time, the poor getting invited to come into this extravagant place, that there's almost this Beverly Hillbillies kind of a moment of, okay, guys, act like this is normal. We're going to go in there and you act like this is just any other day of your life. And they go in, they celebrate, and I think all of that nervousness or discomfort that maybe many of them encountered being in there would have probably subsided by the instructions that we see beginning there in verse 7. Maybe you're wondering, why is it necessary in this story for us to see details about how they were drinking? The customary approach anytime the king invited these political or military leaders into his courts is you were allowed to take a drink when the king took a drink. I mean, it almost sounds like a drinking game, pardon the description, but that's how you did it. You could take a drink as a guest when the king took a drink. So what he's saying here in these instructions is for this celebration at this 7-day place, he emphasizes the extravagance of it. Every single cup was different and unique. Not only that, he also gave this edict. And you have freedom to enjoy and drink whenever you would like. You're here, you don't need to worry about that etiquette. Just relax and enjoy being here, whatever pace. So, and then we get to verse 10. This is the final day of this party. Remember, again, 180 days. Add on the 7 days and the larger crowd. Final day arrives. And we read in verse 10, The heart of the king is merry with wine. He asks the eunuchs to bring his queen with her royal crown, it says in verse 11, in order to show the peoples and the princes her beauty. Maybe you've heard this before, but if not, it's an important footnote, I think, to make here. At this point in history, when a king sends for someone, that's not an optional request. When the king sends for you, it's not, hey, if you're feeling up to it, I want you to come down for a little bit, stop in and say hi. When the king sends for someone, you have to come. You must respond. Magnify that by 10, and in this culture, in this time, when the king said that to his queen, she had to come there upon his request. Adults in the room, track with me on this because I do think this is an element of what we're seeing here. Hear my nuance. It was unacceptable for the queen to refuse any request made by the king. What happens next? In verse 12, it says, but Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command delivered by the eunuchs. But this, the king became enraged. His anger burned within him. You can imagine, right? He's thrown this big party, and what's been the motivation for this party? The extravagance, the pride, the ego, the look at me, look what I have, look what I've done. And now, that pride and that ego has been stomped on in front of everybody by his queen. We don't know the details for sure of what he had planned when he sent for her. You read different historians, they say different things. Most of what you find from the historians is some variation of him objectifying her in some way, shape, or form. Whatever the king's motivation, history seems to indicate that it was not good. Some sort of objectification, assuredly motivated again by his pride and ego, and now with these men here watching, he has to respond. He's just been rejected. So with his pride wounded, the king says this. This is verse 15. So according to the law, what is to be done to Queen Vashti because she has not performed the command of King Ahasuerus delivered by the eunuchs? So his response is, she's broken the law here. What are we going to do? How do we convict her? How are we going to legally handle this? And then it says, I'm reading beginning in verse 16, one of the nobles named Memucan, which is incredibly unfortunate, speaks up there in the crowd. It says, then Memucan said in the presence of the king and the officials, not only against the king has Queen Vashti done wrong, but also against the officials and all the people who are in the province of King Ahasuerus. For the queen's behavior will be made known to all women, causing them to look at their husbands with contempt, since they will say, King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, and she did not come. You hear what they're saying? The other wives will see and hear about this, and they'll think it's okay to say no when their husbands request. That's unacceptable. So what's the solution? There are very few moments in the entirety of the Bible that the The ignorance of men is on display more than this moment. How do they respond? Verse 19. If it pleases the king, let a royal order go out. Let it be written among the laws of the Persians and the Medes so that it may not be repealed. So not only let's make sure this is a law, but let's make sure that nobody can ever change it. That Vashti is never again to come before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal position to another who's better than she. So when the decree is made by the king, it's proclaimed throughout all the kingdom, for it is vast, that all women will give honor to their husbands, high and low alike. So the strategy here is if we make it a law for these women and wives to respect and honor their husbands, then they'll do it. Verse 21, that pleased the king. This advice pleased the king and the princes, and the king did as Memucan proposed. He sent these letters. They had these amazing roadway built throughout this empire of Persia, and within 2 weeks, they could basically take an edict like this and get it anywhere else they wanted. So they take it, and he says, he sent letters to all the royal princes, to every province in its own script, and every people in its own language, that every man be master in his own household and speak according to the language of his people. At face value, right here, as we've seen one glimpse or snapshot of this story in chapter 1, the book of Esther, we've encountered a story which depicts the extreme pridefulness of a man driving a decision which will propagate, at minimum, the devaluation of women, likely in some circumstances, historically, even the abuse of some women. Where is God in chapter 1 of Esther? The reason that I love the book of Esther so much is because it mirrors, again, the vast majority of the circumstances that you and I face in life. This is a story where the circumstances seem filled with darkness. There's no lighthouse, a light screaming out for all to see. Here's God, here's how he's working. Just like so many of the circumstances that you and I face, where we have no idea, literally no earthly idea how God might be working amidst those circumstances that we are going through. And if we're honest about it, there are moments when we, all of us in this room, even question whether he is working amidst those moments. You see, Esther isn't a book that's meant to teach us about marriage. Esther's not a book that's meant to teach either men how ignorant they are or how to treat women. Esther's really not even a book meant to teach us about pride. And while we're talking about what it's not, maybe I'll also add to that we need to realize here that the main character of this book, the main character of Esther, it's not the king that we just read about. It's not Memucan. The main character, as we continue to read forward, it's not Esther. The main character is not Mordecai. It's not Haman. It's not even the Jewish people. The main character of the book of Esther is the one who goes unnamed. The one and only sovereign God. See, we could all name moments in our lives we could all go through and we could find those times when we're navigating these circumstances and things are happening, things are going on, and we're in that proverbial garage and we can't see a thing to navigate forward. You ask us, what is God doing? How is he working? We can't even imagine how to answer that question. Sometimes it can be just the accumulation of the small things. I'll give you just a quick snapshot. A couple weeks ago, we knew we had an air conditioning repair coming that we needed to do. Things continued to get worse, so we pulled the trigger. We already had an estimate. We call them, they come out to the house. They come out, and it ends up being double what the estimate was for. And I'm not talking about double as in we thought it was $100 and it was $200, okay? AC repair at the house doesn't work that way. Younger people, if you haven't owned a house before, don't know how that works. Thousands and thousands, right? So, okay, we do that and we find out here's phase 1, there's phase 2, all much more than we ever thought it was going to be. That next week, I had multiple long drives ahead of me that I needed to make in the car. And one evening, Lori went, my bride, and she said, I'm going to go do, I think she was going to stop somewhere. She was picking something. I'm going to put gas in the car because I know you need to drive wherever tomorrow. I said, okay, that's great. She calls or texts, oh, did you know the brake light's not working? No, I had no idea. So we run it over to one of the local places and get the brake light fixed. The next day, get in the car, and the rearview mirror is dangling by the cord, right, that it's attached to. So, not the first time I've done this. I assume at least a couple of you in here who have as well. Good old duct tape comes out. I'm trying to duct tape that rearview mirror up to make it usable. Footnote, in Houston in the middle of the summer with the heat, that is virtually ineffective, okay? It got up there, and while I was driving, there's a few times where I'm pushing it right back up there. By the time I got back to the car to come home after setting outside, it was dangling, and there was no getting it back up there. This is on top of just a turmoil of intensity in just the current season of life. And so I'm thinking and I'm asking, I'm just talking about the little things here, right? I mean, trust me, they didn't feel like little things, but in the grand scheme of life, this accumulation of 3 things that happened essentially over 3 to 4 days on top of just a season of life. And I'm thinking, God, why in the world are you doing? What could you be doing right now amidst this? I don't see any writing in the clouds of here's what you're doing and here's why. I couldn't see it and I couldn't picture it. It just felt like difficulty or darkness. Now we can go bigger scale. Health issues, health struggles. I can't tell you how many times I've been in that mindset where amidst my journey of 9+ kidney procedures and only to, at the conclusion of that, be told by the doctors this is going to be a chronic thing that you're going to have to just figure out how to deal with at this point. That I've said, okay, God, what are you doing in this? How could you be working in this? And gotten in a mindset as somebody who knows and follows Jesus and felt like I was in the complete darkness. I know every one of you in this room have been there and have felt it before too. We've had those seasons as a church as well. I mean, the easy one that comes to mind, probably a season that may mark many of our stories here, that what led to the COVID season. I mean, thinking through, we move in and we go through all this construction and the excitement, the remodel of coming over here to this location. We have this grand opening celebration in March, only to be shut down, locked down in July. Okay, God, we're your church. Our whole desire, our heartbeat here is to proclaim your glory, to announce your gospel for all to hear. What are you doing amidst this? The book of Esther is a story that teaches us that God is present and working even amidst the darkness of what can feel like complete hopelessness in our lives. This is a story about God working here through a prideful king to, I'm giving you some spoilers, okay? About God moving through the pridefulness of this king to relocate Queen Vashti, to bring in, create this vacuum for Esther to come in and deliver God's people according to his promise. I promise you that no one walking in, the Jews, the people of God who knew him, none of them at this moment would have seen or known that. Would not have been anywhere on their radar. So I want to ask you a question, just in terms of application. I know throws you off. Most of you used to just tell me what the application of this is. What does this have to do with my life? Well, we've been talking about that all morning, but let me do this. Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you, what if God could only work in ways that were obvious to you? That's what we're essentially struggling with here, right? Those seasons when we can't see it and we can't imagine it. So let me pose the question. What if that was in fact the way that God works? He can only work in ways that you can imagine, you can see. I think maybe your first response before you think about it very deeply might say, man, that sounds awesome. No, it really doesn't, does it? Because that means that the God we worship is no more powerful than your imagination or your expectation. That means the God that we worship as the creator of the universe is limited by your feeble intellect and my feeble. And that's not a God that I want to worship. That's not a God that I want to sacrifice everything for. That's not a God that increases a trust in me that even though I feel like I'm in complete darkness, that I can say, no, I know, I trust, and I believe. Even when I can't see it, that he's working, he's alive, and he's present amidst this. We worship a sovereign God who is always at work. He's always at work, even when we are in those seasons, complete darkness, we can't see it or imagine it. Wherever you are this morning. Maybe it's the little circumstances that have avalanched. Financial stuff, other things. Why is God doing? I can't see it. There's no message in the clouds that says what God's doing. Others of you in here, I know for a fact, are going through the big stuff, the health struggles, really big stuff in life, and you aren't able to imagine how God is working amidst it. Well, the promise here, your identity as someone who is in Christ is that he is, in the same way that none of the Jews would have been able to imagine what there in chapter 1 as all of this is happening, what God is doing, that we have the story and can see that his sovereign hand was moving in ways they could never expect or see amidst it all. He's doing the same in your life. I want to invite you to bow your head and close your eyes with me. Father, I ask, Father, that you would just enlarge our view of you. That our faith and our understanding of who you are and how you work would be so much bigger than whether or not we can see that beacon of light on a lighthouse just showing us the way, that it would be so much larger than looking for some miraculous writing on the wall. But Father, that it would be a foundational trust, Father, that carries us through the circumstances, through the dark, hopeless seasons, when what you're doing is not obvious. We can't see it. We can't imagine it. Father, give us a faith that sustains us through that. It carries a belief that you're still moving, that you're still active, you're still working. And Father, might we worship you more because you are a God who is not limited by our expectation, our imagination. Father, I ask that amidst every unique, nuanced story, struggle, season, that's here gathered in this room, maybe watching online, that you would make your presence just felt. That those Abba Father arms would be real, to reach around us in a way that makes that presence just undeniable. We may not be able to describe what you're doing. We may not be able to give it a big purpose. We may not be able to put a bow on it, but Father, maybe you would give us just a slice of that feeling of you being there amidst it. We'll have some prayer leaders that are up in the front of the room to your left this morning. Would love to pray with you about anything going on in life. Both myself and some of the other elders will be in the back. We would love to pray with you about anything that's going on. And we'll celebrate communion this morning. And this is just a moment. It's not a habit or ritual, but it's another act of worship where for those of you who have placed your faith in Jesus, you come and you approach these tables and you take the cup representing his blood shed for you on the cross. Taking the bread representing his body broken for you. And as the Apostle Paul says, every time we approach these tables, we proclaim his death until he returns in glory. So my invitation to you is to respond in worship, respond in communion, respond in prayer. Most importantly, respond to him today.